This video is sponsored by Ultimate Guard. The holidays are coming, so feel free to use the link down below to order some Ultimate Guard products, like this solid color boulder. Ultimate Guard is made famous by their boulders, solid, reliable, and affordable deck boxes. Boulders are now available in solid colors, like this beautiful white one seen here. Find out if your local game store carries the new Ultimate Guard solid color boulders, or click on the link down below to order yourself one from Amazon. Welcome once again to Commander by Danon. Today's video was brought to us by all of my Patreon supporters. Every month I do a poll on my Patreon page, where members can vote. Last month there was a tie between a Rakdos Goblins deck and a video discussing interaction and spot removal. I already made a Grenzo deck this month, and even though it wasn't a dedicated Goblin deck, most of the win conditions involved Goblins, so I think that counts. Which means this video will be a discussion on spot removal and interaction. Now, if you're enjoying my content, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate the support, and if you like the deck list, consider sharing this video as well. Quick announcement before we get into our video. I started streaming on Twitch. There's a link down below in the video description, but the address is twitch.tv/DanonWildfire. Feel free to swing by. I'll be talking about Commander, anime, manga, or whatever else chat wants to discuss. I just started a new job, but I'm going to be streaming on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Unless I've got an event at my kid's school to go to. Interaction comes in multiple categories, and I will sometimes merge them into a single category when building a deck list in order to save time. But today we will be discussing the various forms they can come in. Let's start with the simplest. Destroying or exiling a permanent or spell is the simplest form of spot removal. Yes, counterspells are spot removal. I genuinely do not understand the hate counterspells have in Commander. Personally, I'd rather have my spells countered than my creature taken and used against me by a theft deck. The problem with spot removal is that you're usually trading one card for another card. I cast my spell to remove your permanent. You could say that this is an even trade. Now, in two-player Magic this is true, but Commander is meant to be a multiplayer format. So you and your opponent are both down a card, but your other two opponents did nothing, which means they now have an incremental advantage. That isn't to say you shouldn't run spot removal, but be careful with what you use your spot removal on. If an opponent has a stacks piece that doesn't really affect you too much, maybe a Rule of Law and you're playing a big stompy dinosaur deck, there is no incentive for you to hit it with a Beast Within. But if you're a Spellslinger deck, that card basically shuts down your entire deck's strategy. So hitting it with a Chaos Warp is probably a smart call. So even though you're disadvantaged on card count, you are now back in the game and can continue playing. So what types of spot removal should I be running? What permanents do I need to focus on? Well, part of that is restricted based on your color identity. Black struggles with artifacts, but excels at killing creatures and planeswalkers. Blue doesn't have a ton of cards that say destroy target permanent, but it does have a ton of bounce effects, as well as counter magic. You see my point. This is one of the reasons that 2 or 3 color decks are the standard in Commander, while monocolor decks are a rarity. But going back to the question of what type of permanents you want to focus on, that is determined by your playgroup and what shuts your deck down. A go-wide deck hates seeing cards like Ghostly Prison, and a Voltron deck hates seeing cards like Aura Flux or Energy Flux. Wheel decks hate Narset Parter of Veils, though, to be fair, everyone hates Narset Parter of Veils. And Reanimator and Aristocrat decks hate Rest in Peace. Super Friends decks hate the Immortal Sun. Spellslinger decks hate Rule of Law and Godpharaoh statue. Flicker decks hate Hushbringer and Elishnorn Mother of Machines. So when picking spot removal for your deck, think about the one card you never want to see hit the battlefield, and ensure you have at least a few ways to take care of that card in your deck. And now for a rather divisive topic, land destruction. No, not mass land destruction, calm down, cutestuff. We're still talking about spot removal. Do you have an old school player in your group who runs Gaia's Cradle? What about someone with Field of the Dead, or the infamous Thespian Stage Dark Depths combo? Having spot removal for lands may be the right answer for you. If you're nice, you can run Cleansing Wildfire or Assassin's Trophy to help them get a basic out of the deal. But if they're playing Gaia's Cradle in a casual game, they deserve to have it replaced with an elephant. Not exactly spot removal, I know, but stacks are great at controlling the game, or at least guiding it in a direction we want to see. Some people hear the word stacks and they confuse it with complete lockdown, a prison deck in other words. You can push stacks far enough so that the game does come to a complete halt, but I prefer to just slow the game down a little bit. Commander has gotten way too fast in recent years. I love games that last about an hour. A game where everyone had fun and got to interact and their decks all got to do the thing is a great game, regardless of if I win or lose. But a game where you're playing an Aristocrats deck or some other grindy archetype against a bunch of fast aggro decks isn't fun. Now, some would say that it was simply a bad matchup. I say you're not running enough stacks. Let me give you an example. One of my favorite decks is my Achroma and Crom deck. The deck was built around Lightning Angel, a card with 3 keywords, one of them being Vigilance. Achroma gives all of our creatures +1/+1 for each keyword they have. So Lightning Angel becomes a 6/7, which is a whole lot scarier than a 3/4. I wanted the deck to be mostly angels, and a lot of angels have Vigilance. So the stacks effects I focused on were cards that either caused our opponent's creatures to enter tapped, or prevented them from untapping, at least for one turn. This doesn't prevent my opponents from playing the game, just slows them down. Which is what I want in this deck, as it takes a few turns to build up an army of angels large enough to kill our opponents. Which brings me back to a hotly debated topic, the banning of Rhystic Study and Smothering Tithe in Commander. Forget what's printed on the card for the moment. Rhystic Study actually says spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast. Your opponents may cast spells for 1 less. If they do, you may draw a card. But most players just let you draw cards, which puts them at a disadvantage. They think they're just getting ahead by not paying the 1, but when in reality they're taxing themselves via card advantage. Smothering Tithe is the same thing, but it's taxing your card draw. You can draw all the cards you want to, but if you don't want to pay the 2 mana per card, I get to ramp ahead of you. These cards are stacks pieces that put you, as the opponent facing them, at a disadvantage, which is why you're running spot removal in the first place. I cast Wrath of God to wipe the board. My opponent casts Boros Charm to make sure all of their permanents are indestructible. Isn't that just a counterspell? Some people wonder why I include protection cards like Teferi's Protection or Heroic Intervention in my interaction sections. This is why. When you have a go-wide deck that needs a lot of creatures on board, having a few pieces of mass protection in your deck is like running some narrow counterspells. Remember, we want our interaction to either remove obstacles that block our path to victory, or protect our win conditions. And sometimes, your win condition is a giant board of creatures. The final category I want to talk about in this video is temporary removal. These are removal spells that don't necessarily destroy or exile cards forever. We're talking about bounce spells, transformational auras, or temporary exile effects. Now, we don't often see temporary exile effects because when Oblivion Ring is gone, the permanent just comes back. The exception being something like Angel of Serenity, which puts the exiled cards back in their owner's hands. Now, bounce removal is often more of a tempo play than actual control. What I mean by that is bounce spells are usually pretty cheap. Even mass bounce spells aren't that expensive. But if we spend 2 mana and return an 8 mana dinosaur to our opponent's hand, that means we're up 6 mana. And in the case of Gishath, we also prevented Cutestuff from slamming a bunch of dinosaurs. Of course, if we can generate infinite mana, Capsize is an even nastier version of Cyclonic Rift, because it can target lands. You don't need to run a ton of spot removal or interaction in your deck, but having a little bit in your deck means you still get to play Magic. As I said earlier, my favorite games of Commander are the ones that last about an hour and everyone gets to do things. Interaction makes the game more fun. At least, for me it does. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, a huge shout out to my editor Cute Stuff. I couldn't make these videos without her. If you'd like to hire her to edit your own videos, she can be reached at cutestuff.edits@gmail.com. Link is down below. If you're looking for ways to support the channel directly, you can head on over to patreon.com/Danon. For only $25, you too can have a Commander video built at your request. I also want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons: Waffles, Jiraiya, Danny, Muffins, Marcus, Squishy, Brett, Roxy, Josh, Sean, Pob Zombie, Mark, Borgie, Jake, Exiled Rogue, Nazwin, Pedro, Aranor, Tom, Echo Fox, Midge, Swifty, Lucius, and Detroff. You guys are awesome. I post new Commander deck videos every weekday, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of new videos. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time on Commander by Danon.